I say they won't believe what I might be able to tell them. But they dreamed, everybody dreamed, and they dream yet, honey.
Yeah, but did they believe him?
Well, lots of times they did. If there's an old person close to them and was sick or something or other, and they was looking for him to die or anything like Grandpa did, they would prepare, go and set up. And they'd say, well, I dreamed this, or the way they'd say it. The worst thing people, young people didn't know nothing about, I'm going to tell you this, and then you first laugh about this. They didn't know anything about a log house.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, I was born in the prettiest log house, daubed with mud. And whenever scrub time come in the spring and cleaned up the house, they cleaned up their houses just like they do now. They had punching floors. They split logs, hewed them logs, put them together, and made the floor. Now this is so. I was born there. And I just give anything to go back again. I want to go back to it. And now they use, we'd all go and always had pretty sand. And they'd go get that sand and spread on them logs through the weekly days. They'd be pretty and white, yellow logs too. And they'd put that sand there in the last of the weeks. We'd sweep it up and put it in buckets or whatever we had. But to put it in a while. We'd put it in that, and then Monday morning we'd spread it through the last of the week. While we'd have company, people would visit one another. Then cook up a big old meal, kill a hog, kill 2 or 3 chickens. And then we would, Monday morning come while we'd spread that sand back out. And we'd walk on that sand in the house.
You put the sand on to keep the floor, the logs from getting dirty.
Yeah. Everybody had logs. They weren't the only one. Everybody. Nobody had until old big sawmills come in. Old Captain Basil was the first sawmill. I sat and watched him, the sawmill,
Yeah.
when I was just a kid. My brother got big enough to set blocks. And we kept boarders, my mother did. Just lived off of that. Then we'd keep them people, and then we did not have no lamps. Back when I was a little bitty girl, didn't have no lamps at all, no matches. We had charcoal lamps.
It's okay.
And took a knife and put a little wad of cotton down on the hearth and set that cotton afire, and then built a fire. It was kindling and wood. And my mother she'd take and fix little splinters out of pines, and we'd set them afire. I'd hold them while she gets breakfast being behind the stove, and she had step stove.
A step, what's that?
A step stove. Old timey. Had, just like them steps out there, legs underneath, just legs to hold the stove up, and then you cooked on top. And had it was two steps up there. And had no dirt and no floor in our kitchen, just dirt. Snow would fly in on there. Take a broom, sweep it off, and melt it off. Cook her something to eat.
Tell me how you killed your house.
Well, my mother, I frostbit my feet on it. I've had my feet frostbit. making hog beds.
Hog what?
A hog bed. They had them up in a pen, and they'd put them up, but they hadn't ever covered the pen. And I waited, I threw a plank in and waited across the creek to get me some leaves for 'em. My mother helped the plank the best she could, and my feet turned purple as they wore it on wet, fixing that. And we'd always fatten them in the fall. We'd raise corn and shuck that corn. My poor old mother had 6 children. And my daddy died and I was 4 years old. And they paid 100 bushel rent, shuck corn for rent, that year. So you paid the rent. Save them shucks for the cow. Had her own milk and own butter. Oh, Lord, honey, you don't know nothing about it. And now, people laugh about having mush. We had an old big white pitcher, and she'd strain that pitcher out and put it out in the snow in the wintertime like this, out in the snow. And had snow a little all the time, but not so big as like we have now. And she would go and get that pitcher, and she'd take a kettle and put it on a fireplace full of water. And when it got boiling, she'd stir meal in that and make mush. Put some salt in it and salt it. And every one of us got our old tin cups and around the fireplace, and we eat that mush. Oh, it was good. That was awful. Funny how we had to lose in. There's some men talking to somebody about that.
Didn't have what?
Bedsteads. They didn't have no stores, furniture stores. Didn't have no furniture stores, no nothing. They took rails and dressed them and bored holes, like that was the rail, bored a hole through here, and took lines, they called it a cord in the bed, And fix the footboard, and then they'd take a forked stick, my mother would, and twitch in that line and go around. I followed her with a pin. She'd pull it, and then we'd drive cord it up, and lines go down. And we'd fix our beds up about the last of the week like that now. And we had straw beds. We didn't have no mattresses. Had straw bed made in a factory and a big feather bed on top of it. Oh, we had chickens and geese and ducks. I've helped them poke them many time for to put the feathers in. Way we had meal up here. You know where Clyde lives now. That whole bottom there. Flory Hankins, chef in Flory, buried down yonder. They had a water mill there. And we was married now. That's why I was married. And we'd shell a big turn corn, put in a sack, and go down there, and Lord, Flory could let that, she knew how that meal went, And she'd grind the best meal. Oh, we had our own meal, homemade meal, to make cornbread. And to get flour, honey, we had Joe B. Smith down there in the place. We'd come down there and to Arson Smith's, buy barrels of flour. Turner would. Now, we raised a family of children. And always, nearly every evening, when he'd come with his wagon and that barrel of flour, he'd knock the head out, It was wood. He'd knock the head out, and the young'uns had to stickle him to death. The young'uns would watch their daddy do that. And we baked biscuits for supper then. Because we knew, Have old big dishes of butter. And then think about a little can like these are. It just said they were big dishes.
Did you quilt very much?
No, we didn't quilt very much, so we just raised our own cotton, mostly.
You did?
Yeah.
How'd you raise it?
Well, we planted in the ground, just like they do. You see them off there. They go kind of on a little ridge. They also put them when you plant the seed up on a ridge. Lord, I did love to pick that cotton out of the bowl. They call it the bowl, or the thing. And that cotton had worked out, just working like that out on the limb, And you'd pick that, and then in the wintertime, everybody done that, but I never run my children. They always just went and got them themselves. They'd always measure out. My mother would, all of us, a cup or a teacup or something, cotton. They got a whole lot of seed. Always got just all kinds of seed. And, well, they full of car, and they'd get hot and pick it. And then we'd bat it with cards. Lord, I batted them and had them quilt. Just that way. My mother, we done, we didn't have no sheep till after I got up, a great big girl. And I wore lengths of dresses made out of wool. You see wool. And that old man gave me a little Joe lamb, and we raised it. And she'd share him, my mother would share him. When time come to share him, they'd go get them and put them in the barn, and then put them up on the table, take sheep shears. I don't know whether I had some or whether I didn't at home. And we took them, she'd take that on the hairs. Now, she worked that on the hairs of that old man, Bud Scott, that lives up there. And then they had a loom. He had a loom house out, and had a loom put up. And they called it, I don't know what they called it now. They'd thread it, the chain. They called it the chain, And it was crossed like this somewhere or another. And she, like my fingers, she'd sit there and take her foot and make them treadles, like playing organ or something. And she'd shoot that treadle through there after they spun that wool and hit that yarn. And then she'd bring that thing up and beat it, And we'd make blankets. We had homemade blankets, mostly. And it was better to eat, to sit down to the table then and eat than it is now.
Smokehouse.
Well, I was at a smokehouse and salted our meat down on a big, long table. We'd kill, my mother would, about 4 or 5 old big hogs. They'd weigh about 200. Hogs would then. And then she would take the scraps, all cut off, round up the meat. She'd take them and grind it into sausage. And we'd have sausage of our own. Put sage, she could have the best.
How would you fix the meat when you put it in the smokehouse?
Well, when it took salt in March, we'd go cut a little hickory. And the sap was raising up in the little hickory, and they'd cut it off so long, and then they'd peel that bark, one end after the other, and skin that old bark off. And I cut holes in the hams where the hock is, They'd split holes and then run that bark through. That claims that bark off was better than, well, we didn't have nothing else to. It's like bottomless church, And didn't have nothing else for strings. Just wasn't nothing. Lord, honey, they wasn't a home, or they wasn't a piece of toilet soap, no.
Did you make your soap?
Yes, sir.
How'd you make it?
Well, my mother had an old big round kettle, and she knowed how much. That's when I was a girl, I learned by her, and I done the same thing after I was married. That we put a kettle on, and then they had lye. You know, now they have it in cans, can lye now. But back then it was in balls, old big round, just like a baseball, you know. And she'd had rosin on it, and she beat that rosin all off of it and put it in there and let it all melt. Then she used to say these scraps now, meat and stuff, that she peeled all floors. She went so out a piece of nothing that way. She'd always have a churn or something put it in. And whenever she put that in there, that lye would eat it up. And she could tell when it was like making jelly, you know, when she could tell how thick it would drop, you know, all had a big paddle to make it. And then when it caked, she let it sit for 2 or 3 days in the kettle till it had to let it get cold. And then she'd take and check it each way, you know, and cut up in squares. And she had a certain table that I did too after I was married. I knowed how to do, and I did just like she did. And just let it lay and dry. And then she never dried good, well, she could put it down in boxes or anything she had, you know. Back then they didn't have us. So we just had to. There's nothing. Wasn't no lamps, nor there wasn't nothing to have. We just had to.
How'd you make it?
Well, we burnt wood, you know, in a fireplace. And when the fireplace got got full of ashes, you know, where she'd burn all kind of hickory and everything. That's the most of it. Get the hard wood. And then we had boards, you know, and they take 2 little short logs like this, you know, and put them up on a rock or something other out yonder, so it was easy to carry. And put them boards across that, you know, and double these boards in a shape, and put a barrel. They'd have, well, sometimes they just had, like old time, most of the time they'd get hollow logs, you know, and clean them out down there and put them in, and she'd put them ashes in there, then pour them in a cup of water in it, and that lye would run down there in a trough. They'd make troughs to catch that lye, and that's the way she would make hominy, and she'd make homemade soap that way. I've seen her make homemade soap better. Turner wouldn't. That's what's the moon now. He wouldn't plant by the almanac. He'd always get his almanac, and the moon went by the almanac. That's the way they made the almanacs, you know, by the moon.
Yeah. Back
then. And he'd wait till the moon got, if he wanted the corn to grow tall, he'd wait till it got full. And that's the way he goes. Have corn, you know, to get the shuck and everything, you know. If you plant low, why it'd be low, you know, and you wouldn't have much. The corn would be shucked.
So we plant corn in the full moon to make it tall, huh?
Yeah, that's the way he always done.
Did he have any other things that he'd do like that?
Yeah, mashed potatoes, we'd always plant them about the time the moon was over half full. So they would stay on top of the ground, you know, and not go down the ground. You know, did you notice out here you was planting awful hard to dig? He don't plant them, they just roll right out off that. They'd be better taters too. He wouldn't do nothing. Joe Bunker won't, really, yes.
What about beans?
Beans? Well, he planted with the corn, you see. I did. He never fooled with beans much. But he peddled on the beans, long, he stuck them in there, sack full, and children pack them on. They'd go to Sundays and fix peddling up and go on by. Upon the Creek could tell you sight some people on Pond Creek. We raised cabbage, cucumbers, and all kinds of garden stuff. Oh, just beets and everything. Turnips. I love turnips. And that's cabbage, we'd take them and make crap and put them down in big churns. And whenever they froze in the wintertime, we just run our hands down in there and get them out of that area and never put them in no cans. And we'd fry that, they'd soak a while, and we'd have the best eating there was. Back then, we could cut cucumbers and put them, my mother would, in salt. And I thought, I don't know what that was.
What kind of wedding did you have? Did they have back in?
Well, just now it's like kind of like they have on television, just no. We had a big wedding. I guess it was about 200 was there and ate dinner. The whole creek was there. My sister-in-law had fixed dinner, my mother. She had 2 old stoves. She had one outside that she canned on, and I don't know whether it was 8 squirrels or 12. It was way along our summers that she had on a cooking out there. A big kettle full of squirrels. Then you could go out and kill 5 and 6, have a big mess. And she baked up with molasses, and we didn't have enough sugar, and mix it, and baked fruit cakes, everything. And made log cabins, rolled them out, and made log cabins, and she put them on that table, and they made icing and dabbed on the ends of them where it looked like a little house,
Now, is your wedding cake?
No, well, we didn't have no wedding cake. We just had that, from one end of that table to the other. They had a table about as long as they had put 2 together. And as long as the room was, just to scrounge around. And I just married them. Yeah, plain old clothes. But by the day's work, there was no way to have nothing other than I worked at 30 cents a day and bought me white. They called it print then. I don't know what kind of white dress with my own money, and I worked out me some money and bought my shoes. Then there were shoes, button shoes, but mine was ladies. And I bought me just a plain suit, blue skirt and a coat, and it was made tight, went along like they wear coats now. But now they wore bobbins just like you folks wears now, back then. But we knit them. Did your mother knit any? They said she was knitting some. I never did knit them bobbin, but I knit a many pair of socks and stockings. I had no shoes at all when I was a kid. I was just ready to go to school nearly before I had any shoes. First shoes I ever wore, they tanned cowhides, and made me a pair of moccasins. And I wore them moccasins. Times got better. He just kind of was a little, got better and better and better. There wasn't so many people then, but you're going to have a good time at anybody's house.
What kind of school did you have?
They had good schools, but I was all sick, and that's the reason I got no education. I was all sickly, Never got to go to school much. Didn't have school like you fellas had. They had them in a Sunday. Sitting for that. It didn't say who. For them to take a lot of them children, and go home and cook for them. And learn them children how to read and things like we always, back old times. You mentioned 2 years old. That's Sunday I did that. He knows something about old times.
What kind of school did you have, though?
Just one teacher was all we ever had at the time. Wasn't enough people, there. Wouldn't be over 30 and 40 to go to school. Never they got big enough to work, they had to work. Back then they didn't have to go to school, you didn't care, about us. And our young ones all wanted to go to school the best we could. When big snows would come, they didn't have boots or nothing. He'd all split up, take a board cut, take his mule, put grabs, called old-timey grabs, in that log, and take out to the schoolhouse, and the young ones would take out the pattern. And it wasn't very far, from our house down to school.
Did y'all ever make any moonshine?
No. There wasn't no whiskey back then, maybe. It was tea. They make tea. Spicewood. And in the spring, they'd get sassafras roots. Now that was the best drink. That'd be good, yeah. That was for your house.
Talking about health, what kind of remedies did you have for different diseases?
Well, if we had typhoid or anything like that, my brother died with typhoid. My daddy died with typhoid. Didn't have nothing to give them, They just craved water. And we made teas and things like that, but we didn't have nothing to give them. I heard that on television. We always had honey. Back then, Lord Turner used to have honey. And what they'd eat had honey. Everybody said honey was vitamins in honey. It's made out of trees and blooms and things, Yeah, back then. That Leanne, Lord have mercy, that little girl was over here. She said she was going to, if there was any in honey, she was going to make her grandpa send me a stick, But it don't, everybody right by her asked yet. Lear said Johnny didn't have none. Yes, turpentine, they'd take turpentine, but I don't know what that was for. Just forgot it. That's to put on a sore, You put that turpentine on your sore. They cut yourself. Oh, you always get a bottle full of it. That's the house. Her quilting all the time. Yes, me and my mother, before I married, I had 2 or 3 already made from my...
What kind of patterns did you have?
9 patch. Most of them would be. And take these little strings here and cut a paper and make 8 points. And sew it on that paper and then tear that paper off and then quilt your quilt. It was muslin, But you did store cotton there as long as I think. That's another before we was married. I never had no trouble. I could quilt them before, and then as the young ones growed up, they learned to quilt. That's how come. Them species quilters. I put them at it. They all had 2 apiece, and over there was married. Joe got 4. His house got burned up. He said, Mom, I went and got 2 more, He said, Mom, you've already given me my 2. I said, well, they ain't got none now. And I tell you another thing. People didn't have no wash tubs back then to wash in. They would, my mother would hard often wash for people and use a battling stick to go. And these people had all split a big log open and cut the middle of it out, hew it out, and put a hole up in it to let the water out. You think?
Yeah.
Let's see, what was more hole up in there and take a pin, they let the water out and let the rinse water and all, and have the end of that log and take that battling stick and battle with it. They used that and had no washboards now till I was a young woman. First washboards we ever had. And it had no wash tubs. They'd saw barrels. They used to have wooden barrels. They'd saw them and use them for wash tubs. Back 84 years ago, the 23rd day of this month, that's next Wednesday, this day week, I'll be 84 years old. And of course, you know, I couldn't recollect when my daddy died 4 years. Or just when, there's two things I can remember before they laid him out. And when they started with him he was buried up there in this nigger, they don't know where it's at. Scott store, you know. Scott store, and they put snow was falling. They put a homemade blanket. She fixed it and put red on the ends of it to make it pretty, you know, a weave in it. So they dye their yarn, you know, and she wove it that way, the red on the end. And that's the way my mother said she would always tell that I could recollect my daddy. And I was just 4 years old, you know. And I could recollect seeing them go all out with it. They'd put a line around the casket, put a line around the caskets, and then run a rail, small rail through them lines, and 2 men, one on each end, would carry them to the graveyard. And they cut down in the ground. Put the casket just down the ground and put homemade boards across, you know, to hold the dirt up. That's the way old people was buried. I can get that back. I can prove that by glasses. When my mother was buried, we had a box over her, but my daddy, I didn't, I know.